Hello everyone, welcome to our YouTube channel LitTorrent. This video is going to be about Aristotle's contribution to literary criticism and literary theory. Aristotle is a Greek philosopher and polymath. It is said that he lived from 384 to 322 BC. He was a disciple of Plato and he was also the founder of the Lyceum, the peripatetic school of philosophy, and the Aristotelian tradition. He is the ancient Greek founding father of Western thought who was less interested in the content of literature. His notable work is Poetics. In my previous video on Plato's theory of forms and theory of imitation, I elaborated on Plato's conception of reality and how and why Plato banished poets from his commonwealth. In this video, we will be focusing on Aristotle's understanding of reality and his contribution to the field of literary criticism and theory. Aristotle's views differ from that of Plato's views. Let us look at the points one by one. Plato considered art as an imitation, but whereas Aristotle does not consider art as an imitation. He does not consider art as a reproduction of nature. So, art is not an inferior copy of nature. Rather, art is a process wherein the events of nature are put into a medium that completes nature. So, art is a process that completes nature according to Aristotle. As defined by Plato, reality is not a static when according to Aristotle. Aristotle defined a reality as an ever-changing one in the ordinary world of things and events. Whereas Plato, for example, he thought that any particular chair was only an imitation or an inferior copy of the ideal form of chair that could not be perceived directly through our senses, but that chair only could be deduced by the logical processes like reason. Aristotle, by contrast, he argues that the only way we can know the essence of the chair or the true meaning of the chair is through the individual instances of the chair. So he believed that form exists in the concrete examples of that form and not in some eternal ideal or abstractions. In the material world or the world which we can perceive with our senses, all the things they exist according to some ordered principles. So Aristotle, he loved to discover these rules and principles on how these things work or how these things function and take on meaning in our material world. Like for example, he was interested in observing specific phenomena, specific things like watching someone sitting down in a particular chair and then deducing from that observation those rules that govern how all chairs behave. Like all chairs must have some sort of a seat to support a person's bottom. Okay, so this Aristotelian thought forms the foundations of science in Western philosophy. After the process of observation and then deduction, Aristotle was more interested to catalogue and classify the things of the material world. He loved to deduce general principles of organization and taxonomy from these forms. So Aristotle's science is the foundation for biological classification systems as we know them. We must have learned in our high school biology on how to classify an organism by placing it within the system of a kingdom, phylum, class, order, and so on. Then we would have learned an Aristotelian system of organization. Now, let us take a look on Aristotle's treatment of poetry. Aristotle, he treats all forms including poetry like biology. Like how he loved to categorize things, he was more interested in creating ways in order to identify the characteristics of various forms of poetry. And then he loved to develop these systematic categories through which to classify these forms. Plato found the tradition of moral criticism by worrying about what a work of poetry does to its audience. Aristotle found the tradition of genre criticism by investigating what a particular work is. In his most famous work, Poetics, Aristotle examines literature in terms of its internal structure. For example, he focused on drama in order to identify the formal properties of comedy and tragedy. According to Aristotle, comedy must deal with base people, with peasants and average folk. On the other hand, tragedy must confine itself to the lives of nobility. Aristotelian criticism is interested in discovering the essential qualities of each different kinds of forms of literature, and then after this discovery, Aristotelian criticism focuses on determining how and in what proportion, in what quantity all the elements of any form should come together in order to form a unified literary work. Now let us take a look at some of the key points. Aristotle's artist does not imitate nature. He does not copy nature as Plato argued, but rather an artist takes something from nature. He takes some events from nature and puts these events into a different medium. Okay, and for example, let us take a cherry tree for instance, which is a concrete object. An artist comes along and paints a picture of the cherry tree, or a poet writes a poem about it. The artist is not going to copy the tree, but he is going to create a new version of the cherry tree. By this representation process, the cherry tree, in terms of colors and words, the artist makes the tree over and he recreates it. So thereby, Aristotle's artist is not an imitator, but he is a creator who has a more important role in Aristotle's world. According to Aristotle, artists are very important because they impose order on what might otherwise be a disordered or a chaotic natural world. In the same way, literature also imposes a narrative order on events so that what is described has a beginning, middle or end. For Aristotle, art and literature thus complete a process that the natural world leaves incomplete. Nature presents us with events and phenomena and sensory experiences, whereas art, it creates an order so that we can understand those events and experiences, and thereby it provides us with their meaning. Thus, Plato feared art and literature to be dangerous, whereas Aristotle considered them as positive social forces. Aristotle's artists create order and system, and artists, they help us in finding pleasure in the representations. Okay. With Plato and Aristotle, we see the emergence of two most fundamental strands or traditions in the Western thought about art and literature. One is moral criticism, which concentrates on the content or the effect of a work of art. The other one is formal or aesthetic criticism, which focuses on the form and unity of a work of art. Most critics belonging to the 20th and the 21st centuries tend to follow one tradition or the other. If you like this video, do like it and subscribe this channel for more these kind of videos. Thank you for watching this video till the end.